Welcome to the Leading Together podcast. I'm Sean Lee, joined as always by my co-host Joe Olwig. Joe, how's it going today?
It's going good, going well. My wife just left me. Yeah,
Left you? Like that
not
sounds
forever,
that sounds dramatic. What do you
not
mean?
forever.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got a rare work trip, so she's gonna be out of town for the weekend. So I get to have some fun with the kids for the next few days on my own. Excited, yeah,
That's awesome. I
yeah,
know we've talked before about how it's obviously it's great when our whole families are together, but there's something special about the dynamic of the one parent with the kids when that's not your norm, where it feels
for
different.
sure. Yeah, I'm excited. I've got trying not to overdo it. It's summertime, so make sure we at a minimum get into the pool and do some of those activities. But how
Cool.
about you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, our whole family's leaving for Canada for 10 days for a nice big trip,
Yeah.
heading up to Vancouver Island for 5 days and then over to Vancouver for 5 days. So super excited about that. My son's really hoping to see a bear. The rest of the family is not hoping to see a bear. So I'll let you know.
Yeah. Nice. You gonna catch a Whitecaps game?
I don't think so. Yeah, there no. I don't even. I did think I did check. I don't even think they're playing
Not
while
in
we're there.
town.
But we
Nice.
probably, even if I'd wanted to, I don't think the family would have said yes to that one.
Yep. That's gonna be great. Vancouver, what a place. Nice.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's jump on into the episode today. So, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about something foundational but often invisible. It's this concept of an organizational operating system, something we refer to as an OrgOS, and in particular, the vital role that both people and systems play in shaping it. So, to illustrate this, we're going to share an example from our book, At the Heart of Work. In a technology product company, the founder and CEO is frustrated with Mark, the leader of a product development team. Customer feedback has made it clear which features to focus on in the product roadmap, and in her mind, the CEO has aligned with Mark on these priorities. At the peak of her frustration, she tells a few other members of the executive team, "I'm just not sure Mark is the right person. We've been clear about the features to prioritize, yet he can't seem to bring the level of focus and discipline that this team needs." Meanwhile, the reality for Mark is that two other members of the executive team have been lobbying for feature changes regularly, and the process for feature prioritization has been anything but collaborative. Mark has felt torn as he wants to be responsive to all members of the executive team. Underneath this tension between Mark and the CEO lies issues with role clarity, leader autonomy, prioritization practices, and the executive team's weekly meeting, each of which contributes to lower performance and declining team cohesion. So, we start with this example as a way to maybe unpack what's going on here in this story. What are some of the issues underneath the surface? And how can we begin to understand and identify these when we're facing similar issues as the ones in this story? So, Joe, first question is why do leaders so often misdiagnose their biggest issues when they're facing problems like this one that this team is facing?
Yeah. Well, this is gonna sound silly, but because it's the norm. It's the norm because it's the norm, right? So because we're so used to seeing people just diagnose those exact same issues as a matter of people, right? We're in that habit. And so we're just
Mm,
repeating in many ways what we've seen. But if you get underneath that a little bit, right? And say, so why has that been the case? This sounds maybe counterintuitive because we've all struggled through addressing people issues and found challenge. But at the end of the day, what our brain tells us is that this is the easier way out, right? This is going to
mm,
get me to a quick fix, right? The norms inside of our organization are we want to see managers addressing issues quickly, right? And so we just look at the issue and say that's the easy path, right? To sort
mhm.
of
Yeah.
name it's a people issue. And almost just right in that moment when I'm able to say it's so and so, I'm like I'm off the hook a little bit. Now, if you're the manager, you're a good manager, you got to do something about that. But there's this element of it's quicker, it's a little easier, it doesn't require as much sort of introspection and reflection. And so we do it, right? Um, and feel like we're able to then move on. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it feels easier because we can isolate the issue, which in a world where, and I don't want to jump ahead to our next answer, but in a world where we don't have a lot of time, our minds are kind of almost in survival mode, right? Where we're filtering for all complexity information, just trying to get to the answer. And if we can isolate what we think is the problem to an individual's behavior or performance, that feels like, oh, now I know what I can do with that, right? I can work on this individual's performance or behavior
Yeah.
and trying to make an improvement. So that just feels like, I think it often feels like an easier thing to get our heads around,
Yeah.
to address, and to begin imagining what the path for improvement might be.
Yeah. Well, I think to build off of that a little bit, when we have gone down the path of sort of root cause analysis, right? Or something in that lane, where we often wind up is in this place where it's like, what do I do about that? Maybe I don't feel like I have control over this norm that exists within our organization that's contributing to the issue, right? Or maybe I don't feel like I have any influence over the fact that there's no structure for X, Y, or Z. And so I might, if I've gone down that path a few times, say, I've been down this path before. It doesn't work. I face resistance. And so I'm just
Mm,
going to come right back down the path
mm,
and go
yeah,
down the people path, right?
yeah,
So we don't have the best experiences of actually turning over success and change when we go down this, what we would refer to as the systems path.
yeah. That's really good, Joe. I mean, I had your even though we've talked about this
Yeah,
big
a few times.
reframe so many times. I think even just thinking about placing myself in the shoes of so many of the clients we've worked with, like you can, and even just as we go through our own experiences in organizations, you can imagine them kind of really quickly playing out. Well, like, well, what would it take for
Yeah.
me to change
Yeah.
this process or system that I'm unhappy with? And immediately they go to, well, that just feels hard as hell,
That's
right?
impossible.
That
Yeah.
feels impossible. So
Right.
instead, let's just say it's this issue with bark,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
let's begin addressing that.
Yeah. Well, so maybe just while we're here, while we're all the way down that path, right? And we're those, if you're listening and you're thinking about yourself all the way down that path and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels so impossible. A huge part of today's episode is to help equip you with something when you go down that path,
Yes.
right? And we're going to
Yeah.
share a few different ways to think about that. But
Yeah. That's great.
yeah,
What's the
yeah,
other big what's the other big part of the reason that we misdiagnosed this one?
I mean, I think time and sort of just we're fighting fires, we're moving fast, and we just we just have to keep moving. And I think there's a lot of, maybe one thing we haven't said yet is that at the end of the day, people are the lifeblood of an organization, right? So at no point in time, and we address this in the book, are we suggesting that people don't play a huge role in the success of an organization? And as a result, that when people are actually underperforming, right, or making decisions that are ineffective, or whatever it is, that there shouldn't be some coaching and support and those sorts of things to support the people side. And so I think sometimes it's the people side's clear. I'm so busy, right, fighting
Hmm.
fires, addressing things, that if I make, if I do bring the accountability or the coaching or the support to the people, that will be enough to fix it. And we got a lot of great reps doing that, right? If you're listening, you can probably hopefully count, many, many times that you've been able to address an issue through the effective management, coaching, support, accountability of a person. They shift some things and it gets better, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
most of the time, it doesn't actually get what's at the root, right? But we do have some reps on the positive side when we do actually go and work to address the people piece.
Yeah. Totally. So the first big one we talked about was it's easier to blame people. This one you're hitting on, Joe, is we're too busy fighting fires or we just don't have enough time. Right. And I think if we go back to what you shared and as we started off, the answer to this big question or discussion of this big question here, when you were just saying, hey, it feels so challenging to address and fix this system that feels like it's performing poorly or broken. That is often because like we live in this world. So many people live in this reality of they're fighting fires and they don't feel like And we use that just as a metaphor to say, like, we just don't have a lot of time to really step back. It's not normative for that team to pause, reflect, run retrospectives, to build team learning, shared understanding. Things like
Yeah.
that are not like, they're not normative to the way that the rhythms and patterns in which the team works. And when all that's true, and
Yeah.
you see these things and you're just busy playing whack-a-mole, right? Like crossing things off your task list, everything that's most urgent is the things that you're deciding to do. If you look at your kind of classic Eisenhower matrix, like, you're not often getting to the important and urgent stuff, you're just getting to the urgent stuff.
Yeah.
And this feels important, and yet you live in an environment where all it's been, the unspoken norms are to work on the urgent stuff,
Yeah.
right? And in fact, in some ways, for many cultures, people are actually rewarded for doing that even better and better and better,
Yeah.
right? The
Absolutely.
more effective you can be at addressing these urgent issues and moving on to the next one, like, you're seen as a star. And
Yeah.
so if you work in that environment, this becomes incredibly challenging, right? To then say, raise your hand and say, hey, I think we want to step back, actually slow down, like
Yeah.
put a few of these urgent things off to the back burner, and really work on some of the systems that we're trying to collaborate within.
So why don't we move on to question two here? So for question two, what can leaders and teams do to begin disrupting this pattern? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think maybe one way to begin unpacking this question is to go back to the example we started this episode with. So if we look at that tech product company and the issues they're facing, the tension that's building between the CEO and Mark, and the CEO is growing frustrated with Mark's performance. That's kind of where she's sitting. She's in the world we were just describing, right? She's busy, they're busy, they've got a lot going on. She thinks there's only an issue with Mark's performance. But if she begins to maybe go upstream, right? If she begins to try and apply some, like, root cause analysis, to do what we were just talking about, to take a beat, slow down, zoom out, and see what else might be going on here, both in our within the systems and ways of working, and with Mark's performance. What might she find? So here's what she might find: that the executive team lacks agreed upon norms and decision protocols for what to do when the more urgent issues of the day compete with their set strategic priorities. Right?
Hmm.
She might recognize that she continues to struggle with clear communication.
No, no way.
You know what, Joe? I've never heard about communication issues in organizations, right? So it's shocking. She's got some opportunity to improve on her communication, specifically around, like, priorities and who owns them and key processes and things like that. And then that the priorities of the department teams are demanding Mark's attention, but the executive team is largely unaware of what those priorities are, right? So if you've worked in that environment where, like, the priorities are bubbling up, they're demanding your time, they're pulling you away, not everyone even knows that's going on, but you do, right? And you're being responsive to them. And then lastly, that Mark finds that the skill of delegation is more challenging for him in a fast paced environment, and it significantly impacts his ability to be effective.
Hmm.
So, so Joe, maybe I'll turn it back over to you, but I think what we begin to see in this is both people and systems issues. Hopefully, you heard in those examples people and systems issues. Yeah, maybe you want to build
Yeah.
upon that?
Well, I think if you're listening, if what you're hearing is we need to do more root cause analysis and do more step back work, and right? You're thinking that that's true, right? This is true. Um, Two things that we want to bring into today that may be newer. One is this idea that when we do that, what we see at the heart of work and workplace issues are people and systems. And we want everyone to really appreciate this gap that exists, which is, if we go to the Deming quote in percentage, W. Edwards Deming, 94% of issues in the workplace are systemic. And no one's disputing that, right? Everyone is, I know it's an old study, but no one's disputing that. In fact, everyone is doubling down on that reality. So we know that almost all have this element of gaps in our system. And yet, as we think about the issue that we've shown, we all know that more often than not, it is being addressed purely at the person, at the people level,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's okay. What do we do about this, right? And I know that's what we're going to get into with this question, but what do we do now that we have a greater appreciation for that gap? We have some language around people and systems. Okay, that's a memorable, right? People and systems. So what do I do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, and I think I know you're being a little cheeky here, saying duh, but the reality is, and we know from our work with so many teams, I think what you shared there last is a significant and meaningful movement if does become a shared understanding on a team,
Yes.
right? Like if and have that language as you just described, right? So while this, on one hand, you may be thinking this sounds obvious, so we can tell you from experience what is not obvious, what is not widely embraced and shared among many teams is this idea that when we face or this maybe it's a practice, like as when we face pervasive significant issues, that we as a team begin to look at each other and say, hey, is that really a performance issue or behavioral issue with that individual, or might there be something else going on that's
Yeah.
more systemic,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
so on
Yeah.
one hand it's obvious, on the other hand it's incredibly rare for teams to do this in a regular and meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, I think the common language piece that you're can't be underestimated, right? Just getting in with your team and aligning on the conversation that we're having right now and having some common language around an understanding of the gap, how pervasive systems issues are, and have this people and system. And also, again, people are a part of it. People are the lifeblood. We firmly believe that when we find great people, committed people, that's plays such an important role. um, and it's only part of it, right? So if we go to the question here of what do we do about it, I think part one, or the lighter weight thing that we can do to overcome and disrupt this pattern, is to do what we're saying, right? Bring your team together, have a moment where we're aligning on these realities. We're bringing some common language around workplace issues of people and systems, and just begin using that language and bringing an upstream mindset into your day to day leadership team meetings, one on ones where somebody's coming at you with an issue and you need to help coach them through it. Bring that lens, right? Bring those upstream questions. And what you'll soon find is that you're consistently getting to the systems side of it, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's sort of step one. But what else? How else might we equip this, our audience here with overcoming the pattern?
Well, I think another way, and this is I think is still a bit more mindset oriented than it is particularly focused practice, but it is just an appreciation that this is not an either or conversation. Even though the Deming quote does say the 94%, I think what we would argue is that, and yet there's also often people issues that exist alongside those systems issues, right? So I think one just encouragement as you is it may be a warning, right? To not go too far the other way. If you're hearing this and it feels like a real light bulb moment and you're like, oh my gosh, like I need to do this, and then you find yourself like swayed all the way the other way, and you're now not indexing appropriately for the performance people issues that might be going on. I think we would say is that it's usually both, right? Now, they're not equally weighted, right? You could look at a lot of things and say, this is more of a systems issue, but there are some, the way people are showing up, their individual
Yeah.
behavior that also needs to be addressed. So, yeah, I just offer that with maybe warning and guidance there for teams.
Yeah, I love that. What I'm hearing in that too is don't lower your bar for what you expect of people,
Right.
right? Like this is sort of a little bit of that support challenge that you're bringing into your organization at a macro level. Continue to challenge and hold people to high expectations, expect them to, be driving towards their best selves, and bring support and empathy for the issues that they're facing with an appreciation for the system's role in it, and work to address it, right? And figure out ways to address it. I love that.
That's awesome, Joe. Well, why don't we move into our last question here?
Let's do it.
So what do you think is most important for teams to consider as they get started and really embracing this idea of an upstream mindset and appreciating the role people and systems play in shaping their work.
Yeah. Well, I think, we didn't get to this in the last question, but I think the embracing the idea of an organizational operating system would be one place to start. Now, when you hear that, you might immediately think, what's that? I don't have one, right? And take a deep breath. We would suggest that you do based on our definition, right? We just define it as the set of norms, processes, routines, structures that define the way a team works. That's it, right? And so it's this underlying, so embracing the idea that there is this macro system that underlies all of the work that we do. It's made up of those different sort of components. And that really the difference between one team and another's is just the degree to which they've defined it and implemented it with more intention, right? And so I think one thing you can do to get started is just to have an appreciation for this idea of an organizational operating system and start to do some learning and on what that is, and consider adopting more of a hardy framework to bring more intentionality and definition to your organizational operating system. And we've got that old book that we wrote, right, called At the Heart of Work, that if anybody's interested, right, not the only framework out there for an org OS, but
Yeah,
a framework. So
yeah,
I start there, and then I think you'll probably get into this, but then once you do that, it's getting your team involved in, so how do we want to approach this, right? Then just making some decisions about what's progress going to look like for us. How are we going to begin to step into some of this?
yeah. That's great, Joe. Yeah, I love that as a segue. I mean, I think what we know to be true when it comes to bringing intention to your org OS, and maybe just a little bit more, it's like your unique identity as an organization, like the way you do strategic planning, like clarity of roles, how
Hmm.
you think about feedback, how you bring in design to your meetings. These are the types of things that it looks like as you're doing that work, as you're bringing intention to your org OS, for it to be resilient, for it to stand the test of time, for it to continue to build and build in a way that is getting stronger and stronger. It really requires that the people that are going to be carrying out the work are involved in shaping those norms, routines, and practices, right? So
Yeah.
if it's done into them, right, said like, here's the play, run it, here's the playbook, run it, you might see some marginal success, but we'd argue that you will see a lot less success. That if people are given the opportunity to shape how work works, that they're going to be more energized, they're going to be more excited. There's going to be more learning and growth of the system and the teams that are practicing them.
Yeah. I love that. It sounds so simple, Sean, right?
Right.
And yet it is, timeless wisdom to share with people this importance of involving your team and others in the process of designing your systems, right? This idea of with people, right? And for people, with people meaning bring them along, right? Through that, create agency, right?
Hmm.
In a very
Hmm.
authentic, purpose-centered way, and
Yeah.
then design for people, right? We need to make
Yeah.
sure that our systems are designed for us as humans, right? What do we care about within the system? How can we be mindful of, human behavior and our preferences and our needs, and in designing just all these different little aspects of your operating system, and starting small, but yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
great.
and totally, and maybe to share a story of what the harm it can cause when you don't do this, with like involving people. And I'll share. I was on a discovery call with a client, and they were basically talking about a bad experience they had trying to implement EOS. And EOS, if you're not familiar with it, just stands for the Entrepreneur's Operating System. It's a
Hmm.
version of an operating system, as Joe mentions. There are several. We have one, obviously. But what happened was that the executive team was brought into a meeting where they were basically told, like, we are adopting this new framework. And in that very first meeting, an outside consultant was there, the CEO was there, that executive team, like you kind of envision like the first thing that went wrong here is the executive team wasn't involved in the decision making process for this new framework. And as they were listening to how it would go and what implementation would look like, and the core components of this framework, the leader that I was meeting with began to grow in frustration. He began to get angry, and he began to wonder, what about all the good work we've done? Even though they didn't have the word OrgOS for it or the term, essentially what he was thinking is like, we've done some work to design the way we work or design our OrgOS. And I feel pretty good. I think other members of the team probably feel good about some of those components. What happens to those components? And the two things that came to mind for him were like they developed a strong annual goal setting process that was different than the prescription in EOS.
Yeah.
And they had adopted something called an after action review, which is basically just a form of a retrospective, right? And felt good about those two practices.
Yeah.
And they had thoughtfully designed and adopted those for their environment. They did that. But now it was sort of like that stuff is we're casting aside, and we're just going to put this new system in place, but
Yeah.
didn't appreciate the things that the team was already excited about and felt good about. So
Yeah.
as a result, the end of the story is that the team, simply because they did not have voice and agency, ended up they got like 1.5 meetings into that process of trying to adopt this new framework, and it totally blew up. Right?
Mm.
Like they ended up they just pulled the plug on it and didn't do it, and sort of then had to figure out, well, what do we do now, right? Because they
Yeah.
skipped this step of involving the people and involving the team and how that work would look.
Yeah. Well, I love that you summarized that story with what you shared at the end there, because that's the key point, right? The key point is not that a proven pathway and structure is always bad, right? If you've involved the
Yeah,
team in the
right.
decision to say, hey, we're going to just adopt the plug and play framework, right? And everyone on the team's in agreement that's the best path for us. Great. You've been involved. A different team may say, no, we want to customize our whole thing. We like this, but we need full customization rights. We want to build our
Yeah,
own framework, right?
right.
Great as well. Involve them in the process. When we don't, right, that's when we don't have the agency and the buy-in and the investment that is just essential to a system that's going to last more than a few months. I love
That's
that
right.
story. That's
That's
great.
right. Well, cool. Well, let's wrap up the episode here today, Joe.
Yeah.
What's one move leadership teams can make to start embracing this idea of people and systems?
Yeah, I'm gonna go off script here a little bit with this one.
Yeah.
I love doing that. So I think it, because it's so rare for teams to normalize sort of working on your system, I think one thing that I would encourage leadership teams to do is to encourage and really normalize retrospectives when issues come up that feel maybe it's been more of a pattern, right? And there could be a system issue at play. Just normalizing, hey, this happened. We're going to bring the group together. Maybe it's the leadership team. Maybe it's an executive who leads their own department. But we're going to begin to normalize this process where we come together, look at the issue, or maybe it's a string of issues, bring an upstream mindset, spiral these ideas of people and systems. We're going to bring upstream mindset. Most likely a systems issue is at play here, and just go through that exercise. And through that, what will happen is you'll normalize actually trying to make incremental growth with your system, right? Because you've all been at the table and you've identified, well, yeah, you know what? At the end of the day, it's the fact that we have this awful unspoken norm about X,
Mm.
no
Hmm.
more, right? Or
Yeah,
all right, it's the one-on-one structure that's awful, right? Let's actually develop that one-on-one structure so that it's not creating these issues. In fact, it's doing things in a, it's contributing, right, to the culture. So encourage that retrospective culture and begin running those, and you'll start to see these opportunities to make incremental progress on the system side.
that's great, Joe. Thanks for that. Let's go ahead and wrap this episode up. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leading Together. As always, if you found it valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps more leadership teams discover these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, or drop a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find more resources at sixlevers.co. Until next time, remember to take that one step towards becoming a more cohesive and high-performing leadership team.